just tell me a little bit about yourself and your role here at the church, and then also kind of how the church and yourself got involved in the with the migrant community at Wadsworth?
My name is Reverend Dr. Kenneth D. Phelps. I am the senior pastor as well as the executive director of the Concord Community Organization. I've been the senior pastor here for about 31 years now, and CCO has been around for about 15 or 16 years, and our ministry has always focused on preaching, worship, but also community engagement, justice, education, and responding to the needs of vulnerable people in our community, regardless of race, creed, or color. For us, it's very simple. The needs of the community shapes what we do. So, I guess 2022, maybe when the new arrivals, I don't refer to them as migrants, when the new arrivals pretty much came to Wadsworth, which is right through the alley there, offered an olive branch, right? And went over and, again, had no idea as to what they would, but we did see many of the migrants walking around through the neighborhood. They were looking for food, they were looking for clothing, transportation, information, or someone to just really speak to them with compassion and dignity. And so we just went over there. You know, I was very limited in my Spanish-speaking capabilities with one of the residents from the community and the founder of Chicago for All, Paula Jean, members from the community that spoke Spanish, and we just would go over there and just say, hey, I'm Reverend Phelps, you know, how can I serve you? And then from there we started getting ideas, you know. Many of them said, hey, we learn how to speak English, or, you know, we need jobs, or we need, you know, housing support, or we need, you know, legal support, because we're in the process, so we need, you know, assistance with getting our job. Whatever they kind of said they needed, we would use our resources to try to connect with them. So we kind of saw ourselves not only as a concierge service, but also as a liaison.
Right, like a point of first contact,
Exactly.
And understanding their needs and connecting them maybe to people.
So we pretty much created what we call a welcoming center, which we call the Home Away from Home Center.
Can we talk a little bit more about the English classes? I know a lot of the things you connected them to, you know, other organizations, but the English classes was something that you did here in-house. And can you explain to me kind of why you felt that there was a need for the church to take on that role, and a little bit more about how did that go? What were the challenges with that? Because of course language is such a big thing for migrants, but a lot of people talk about the difficulties with, and I know you don't speak a lot of Spanish, so it's like, how did you kind of...
Yeah, well, again, the lion's share of those who we chatted with said that that's what they needed. Right. Probably the biggest challenge was trying to find an English as a second language resource. Someone that could literally, because it's different, it's a big difference in speaking Spanish or English, speaking English and English, and teaching it.
Right. Yeah.
And teaching it, right? So reached out to the community, and to my surprise, there were several residents within this particular community that said, hey, we're certified English as a second language, teachers,
wow.
right?
Were these teachers in schools, or?
Yeah, so they were in school, and so they would volunteer their time to actually come and so as we began to get a lot of media and get a lot of attention, then resources and volunteers just kind of popped up saying, hey, we would be willing to help. So as we began to see it grow, we then reached out to the City of Chicago colleges, particularly, specifically Kennedy King College. And they also have English as a second language, as well as Spanish classes. We became an extension remote classroom, and so they could actually register not only just for English as a second language, but also any other classes that city colleges offer.
Oh, very cool. And they could do that remotely from here.
From here, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And how long is it still going on, or how long did it
Yeah,
go on for?
so we did it for probably about 8 or 9 months.
Okay.
And then as the families started integrating into
Mhm.
other communities, you know, travel and other things became an obstacle,
Mhm.
right? And so started actually going to camp to classes on campus. But we still have a relationship with Kennedy King and also Chicago colleges, and so we can certainly offer any type of class.
Right. No, that makes sense. And also just evolving with the changing
Yeah.
needs of the communities, which
Excellent.
completely makes sense. And
Yeah.
especially because recently, something we've been thinking a lot about is, within CPS too now, these kids, like new arrivals, are more integrated in schools, but the thing is, like, a lot of schools don't have the resources. The teacher shortages overall, and then, forget, like, teachers who, like, bilingual teachers who are able to do that. And
Exactly.
so that's definitely a big question,
And challenge, right?
A huge
But I
challenge,
also
yeah.
see it as an opportunity.
yes.
Yeah, I see it as an opportunity, and I think that as we seek solutions, I think it's going to make us better.
It is, for sure. And as you know, we've been looking at, like, the CPS data, and what we're really seeing is, as, like, there's like a kind of a line they have where it's like, if you have more than 20 English as a second language students, then you need to qualify as a bilingual school. And it is really an opportunity to spread this infrastructure, right, in places that, maybe didn't have that diversity, because it's not even just this population, there's always going to be populations who need that support. And so that is, it's an opportunity, and
Yeah.
I hope things look up from there, because it's not even just this population, there's always going to be populations who need that support. And so that is, it's an opportunity, and
Yeah.
I hope things look up from there. But moving a little bit from there, I want to understand a little bit more about, I've heard a lot about Wadsworth specifically. I know it was a single shelter, and I know that, this is like I think at the start, of course, everyone came together and it's a really rosy picture, but there is, of course, a lot of tension there with Wadsworth, like, being a school that, was supposed to be reopened. And overall broader tension of, like, our communities also need these resources, our longer term Chicago residents. And later we'll go more into, like, housing and the initiative, but I just want to understand, like, initially, like, what was your perception of, like, the community, and how, was there, like, tension there, or was that something that showed up a little bit later after the first few months, or?
No, there was tension from the get. There was protests. There were community activists that literally stood in front of buses to prevent them from actually.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, and not only just at the refuge or the shelter, but also even during our first worship service.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there were people that protested, saying that they didn't really want them here. So no, there's been tension from the beginning, but the tension again, I think was, rightfully so. The African American community had been promised that the abandoned school would be utilized for workforce training. And we were told that there were no resources, no funding to actually do it. And then all of a sudden, overnight, which appeared to be overnight, right? They found resources enough to create a shelter.
Mm-hmm.
Furthermore, I think it was also, we felt slighted, we felt traumatized in the sense that, not only did you find resources to help, the Venezuelans or the new arrivals, but you also didn't give us an opportunity to bid on this work. And again, Wadsworth really carried emotional significance, because once it was once a neighborhood school, and many of the residents really felt decisions were being made without community engagement and or conversations. And then even when they started having these conversations, it, it felt kind of insulting, because it wasn't so much it was more, excuse my language, more of a gripe or bitch session, if you will, as opposed to really having respectful conversation as to.
It didn't feel like a two-way dialogue.
It didn't feel like, it didn't feel
we're
like,
just gonna listen to you because you're unhappy, but we're not gonna actually.
But we're not gonna do nothing, right? You know, so it feels like, listen, this was more, let me tell you what we're gonna do.
Right.
You know, as opposed to saying, hey, this is the idea, this is what we would like to do, what do you think? Or how do you feel about this? Or what do you want? And I'm telling you what I want, but it really, we know that it's not gonna matter. So again, we felt like the community meetings were just more of a show, as opposed to, and it was the CYA that just covered their behinds, but they really, never sincerely intended to apply our feedback and make changes.
Right. And would you say this kind of held through in policy throughout, even when they were shutting the shelters, when they were unifying? Was there any improvement in taking the dialogue?
It was. I think the city rebounded. But yeah, the city told us it's only going to be a year and a half, and they kept their word. The city said, hey, we're not going to give special preferential treatment to new arrivals. We're going to create a one system where you can just kind of dial in, and whoever needs help, this is how you do it. So yeah, so therefore they're not making a difference, whether you are a new arrival or you are a long-time residents. If you need help or you need assistance, you make that call. I think that's a step in the right direction, because you're basically saying that our resources that are available to everybody. And yet, there's still, underinvestment in African American communities. There's still issues with employment, with education, with security, socioeconomic, and also trauma. So some of the same issues still exist today. But again, I think that we have the ability to do when we put our minds to it. We show there are resources available, because that's another thing we've been told.
Right. They always tell you there's no money, but then
no
for
money.
things that need it, they
Yeah.
always find it.
Yeah, they always find it, right? You don't have money to fund, affordable health care, but you do have money to fund a war in Iran. That kind of thing. So it's the hypocrisy.
You did say, I think you had a relatively positive conception of at least the unified system, the one system initiative, in the sense that.
Towards the end, basically, they did hear the feedback, right, and started saying, hey, what should we do? Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that's probably the least that we could ask.
And at the start, were people kind of able to work? I know, I don't know how familiar you are with the TPS and things like that, but from my understanding, there was an emergency measure, and at some point, they were supposed to be able to qualify for TPS, but then that's recently been revoked.
A lot of scrambling to try to get the work permits. A lot of things were delayed. There were some challenges in the fact that many of the new arrivals were on the move. A lot of employee abuse. And so yeah, we saw all of that, and we kind of helped them to kind of navigate, try to get them to understand what their rights are. Well, housing, like you said, housing, employment, and language.
And language, yes, absolutely.
And language, that's the huge thing.
Right.
Right? Because I've come to know how brilliant and intelligent they are. It's nothing more heartbreaking seeing a doctor or a lawyer cutting grass because they either don't have the work permits, they don't have the certifications, and they don't have the language to kind of communicate, what they are. But yet, but they're humble enough to say, I would rather do this than to steal or to do anything that is illegal. It also, in some cases, further promotes the bigotry, conscious or unconscious bias, if you will, that we have. And so if I don't understand you, you must be stupid.
Yeah. And it's difficult, because you see that even when people speak English with an accent, you still have that bias. So there's so many different levels, and it's also difficult because it's like we're talking about this on one hand. On the other hand, we're talking about we have a shortage of CPS teachers who speak Spanish. There are communities they could serve, and there are needs that could be met, and it's always so frustrating when people on both ends are suffering, and you just think, but couldn't these people?
So there were several things. As a result of Midway Blitz, many of the new arrivals went into hiding, would only come out to work or to get food, only just necessity. We took minimal risk. The major impact there is fear. Carpool so that we can get them to that, we have bus passes to kind of allow those kinds of things because, it's really kind of difficult because I also believe that you're going to see, and I think we're starting to see it, a resurrection of Midway Blitz 2.0. The strategy is what I call the otherization of people. Pitted us against each other, black against white, white against brown. Further exacerbate the situation by creating false narratives, basically.
This is what ICE does. This is what these terrorists do to babies.
Mama, you okay, Mama? You okay?
We saw how that really impacted. It's interesting because you invited and you encouraged Haitians to come to that community to help out with an employment situation. These are jobs that you didn't want. And even after you've made them leave, you still don't. It's the blessing or the beauty of the revelation or the woke moment, if you will, is that when they attacked in South Shore, they not only arrested brown folk, but they also arrested black people. That was, again, an aha moment for us.
I've never had a gun put in my face. They asked my name and my date of birth and asked me did I have any warrants, and I told them no.
She says she was then handcuffed and released around 3 a.m.
Now we see that, they're not coming, because we were fed, no, we're not trying to attack you. Oh, but you really are trying to criminalize us all. Same thing that happened in Minnesota. Okay, well, they're not only killing brown folks, but they're killing white folk. It's really a control mechanism, I think, because even myself, I was under the impression that we were a lot further along.
We've talked about kind of a lot of looking forward. We've talked about, I'm going to just recap a little bit, we've talked about kind of more power to the states. We've talked about the importance of language infrastructure in schools particularly. We've talked about the importance of dialogue with existing communities when policy is being made and kind of moving away from a top-down imposed way of implementing policy, which maybe there was some improvement, but going forward, kind of the importance of staying in touch with community leaders and things like that. This gets to any policymakers. Say what can we ask from you so that we can be better prepared? And so
I would like for them to come up with a fair and humane immigration policy, that we can really, really apply across the board. I wish that we could also have an expedited work permit process, a way to give people credit for their vocation, training and their skills, but have a credentialing process, right? They can begin to work in areas.
Because if you're saying there's a path for these people to seek asylum in the country, and that's part of what we do and part of what's made America America, then it has to be an actual practical path. It can't just be like you come here and you apply, but you can't work and you can't So absolutely, I think that's really important.
Yeah. So those are the kinds of things, and then funding to help all of our vulnerable citizens.
Right.
But I would also ask them to stop treating vulnerable communities as political puppets or talking points. I think I would like to see them put their money where their mouth is, invest in both immigrant communities as well as historically marginalized African American, brown communities simultaneously. Love for them to also include local leaders, and I'm not just talking about politicians, but I'm also talking about preachers, I'm talking about teachers, community leaders, right, in the planning process, and really be able to focus on human dignity rather than political optics.
And I think it's just what you're saying is so important also in the sense of it's so important we ground our politics and our policy in the lived experiences of people. And a lot of times politicians are quite removed from that, and at least by talking to community leaders who are working on the ground with people, like you said, preachers, teachers, all these people, like our daily lives are much more intertwined in the community. I think that is a big takeaway that, and that's also why I think the importance of city politics, of community organizing, like the more local sometimes the better, because that's where you're actually going in and doing the work.